Fit to Love, episode 57, Secrets of Self-Control.
Fit to Love is physical, emotional, and spiritual fitness to achieve the happy life you deserve. From exercise to cooking, relationships, and spirituality, you'll find all the inspiration you need right here with our host, JJ Flizanes.
Hello and welcome to Fit to Love Thoughtful Thursdays. Today's show, The Secrets of Self-Control. We have back our very popular Dr. Lisa Galper. She has helped thousands discover their own power over food and to win freedom from the obsession and defeat that haunt yo-yo dieters, emotional eaters, and those who just hope to lose some weight. As a licensed clinical psychologist, author, and workshop facilitator, Lisa Galper has transformed the eating behaviors of readers, workshop participants, healthcare professionals, and organizations across the country. Dr. Galper has made numerous local television and radio appearances on shows such as Sonoran Living and Healthy Living A to Z. On KTVK AZ Family Channel 3, she served as a psychology expert for the station's Weight Loss Challenge. Dr. Lisa Galper contributes regularly to articles in the Arizona Republic, the East Valley Tribune, and local magazines in Phoenix and Scottsdale, Arizona. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, JJ. Thanks for having me.
Your Week in the Cycle of Emotional Eating show was one of the most popular shows when we launched it, and so I welcome you back. Thank you so much. Your information is so needed and desired amongst everyone in the world. It was very popular, and I know today's show is going to be just as great. So we're going to talk about secrets of self-control, but first, to link this together, because I think this show can apply to even a wider audience than just people who identify themselves as emotional eaters.
Absolutely.
Can you link for us like the role that self-control plays in emotional eating?
Certainly. In emotional eaters, self-control is really not just the ability to say no, it's also the ability to be willing to manage your emotions. So we think of self-control as resisting temptation to say no to eating that donut. We don't think of with self-control as our willingness to practice exercising our emotional coping skills muscles.
Excellent. So what's the most important step that then we need to remember when we're thinking about self-control or becoming better at having more of it or increasing it?
Well, I think that one of the most important things that people in general, whether an emotional eater or just wanting to change something in your life, I think that we don't take enough time to really ask ourselves, why is this so important to me? How is it going to benefit me? What are going to be the consequences if I don't do this? Really pulling that question apart, asking yourself, what would my future life look like, feel like? I very often will do an imagery with people to have them imagine what it would be like, for example, for people who are overeaters. What would it be like to be in your body, managing your eating, managing your emotions, managing your life well? What would it feel like? What would you be thinking? How would you be moving, walking, standing, interacting with others? I think it's very important for us to begin imagining what would that future us feel like? Because when we're making a change, our desire to make the change needs to be kept in the front of our minds, and we have to get a really powerful emotional experience of why that change is so darn important to us, because otherwise old habits will take over. You'll frequently get distracted from your desire to change, and that's one of the things that gets in the way. So being able to come up with what I call an emotionally important why, and then keep that emotionally important why in the front of your mind. You might even read it over every morning for a few minutes. And for people who are emotional eaters, I very often will ask them, if you were going to turn that into a statement of who you are, for example, I am a mindful eater, and repeat that affirmation throughout the day. That's one way to keep your emotionally important why in the front of your mind. And before you make a choice to eat, to be able to repeat that emotionally important why. And this is going to be true whether you're stopping smoking or trying not to overeat or trying to get yourself even to do something you're procrastinating on. You might look at your why. Why would I, want to do this instead of procrastinate? We need to know what are the benefits and what are the consequences as well, because consequences will also get us to do things, to move forward. What was it like the last time you procrastinated? Or what was it like the last time you overate and sat with it? Going through these kinds of questions really helps us get a more emotional stronghold on our desire to change.
Where in the process of working with someone for overcoming emotional eating does self-control come up? Does it come up right in the beginning? Is it something that someone comes in seeking, or is it an awareness that you help them to cultivate?
Most of the people who come to see me are aware that they feel or experience a lack of self control around food, very often around getting themselves to exercise. Remember, self control is about both stopping doing certain things and getting themselves to do other things like go shopping for healthy foods or journal their emotions. So, most of the time, when people come in, they're most concerned with trying to gain control over their eating. For example, one person came in and told me, I just feel like I can't stop overeating throughout the day. Every time I feel stressed out, I go to the vending machine and I can't stop. I feel like every time I experience distress or upsetting news or an upsetting email, and this was part of this woman's job, it was pretty common. I feel this strong urge to act on that and go and eat. And she would typically choose comfort foods and sweets and simple carbohydrate foods. That did make her feel better in the short run.
Well, absolutely. And I know, being a psychologist for you, and then just my inquisitiveness of who I have always been, you and I love asking the question why. But I also know that a lot of my clients and people that I meet, a lot of people really aren't that interested. How do you find people, or how do they convert, if you will, from someone being sort of unconscious? I mean, does it have to be that they're in pain and that they're having physical problems? Or is it that they're, like you said, aware that they feel out of control? Like, what's the majority of people? Because, like I said, I think I'm not normal in how many, in how I often ask why this, why that. But I know some people have a headache, like trying to follow sometimes how many whys I may ask. And so I'm just curious as to the population that you work with and people who are considered emotional eaters. Where are they on that scale of unconscious and becoming inquisitive and then eventually even curious?
You hit the nail on the head when you used the term unconscious. One of the first steps in in creating the emotionally important why is to start by becoming more self-aware of what you're doing right now without even trying to change. We get very hooked into starting with, I need to change this, I need to change that. First, we need to see what we're doing and what kinds of situations we're doing these things in, things that are perhaps not goal supporting. So if a person says, I'm an emotional eater, I'll say, what are you feeling when you eat emotionally? What kinds of thoughts might prompt it? What kinds of situations is it showing up in? And as we start examining those things, people start seeing, oh, this is why I'm eating. This is the kind of situation where I start to lose self control. What is it that I tell myself, perhaps to give myself permission? For example, the rationalization. Oh, well, just this once. So when I'm helping a person develop an emotionally important why, because much of the time people actually don't really know exactly why, they just know they want something to change so badly because they're in a lot of pain. I'll start looking with them at what the eating and the experience of it is helping them with. What are the situations it's making them feel more comfortable in? And that's where they begin to see, oh, I'm noticing that when I'm in a social circumstance, I feel really uncomfortable. Might be an example. And then there are a bunch of hors d'oeuvres out, and I start to nibble, and then I drink a glass of wine, and then I start to feel a little bit more socially comfortable. So now we might look at the emotionally important why being something that might relate to either them becoming socially comfortable or something like going to a social event gets in the way of them wanting to, for example, lose weight. So sometimes the why it shows up by noticing what we're using food for. Oh, I'm using food for comfort. Well, maybe that person who uses food for comfort needs to find other ways to comfort themselves. Maybe after comforting themselves, they feel badly and guilty and shameful about what they did because they judge themselves. And perhaps they say, my future self would rather feel happier with myself, less judgmental, and not overeat. So it's really important as we look at what we're using food to help us do and what kinds of situations it helps us cope with and what kinds of thoughts we have that lead us to perhaps undermine ourselves, like, oh, I've been so good all week. Now I'm going to really be bad. To ask ourselves, how are these thoughts, feelings, and situations helping or hindering me from attaining my goals, which might be to lose weight, to be healthier, to be well, to feel good about myself?
I love the idea of the emotionally important why, because obviously I think I've heard it before as just what's your why. But to add the emotionally important why obviously kicks up the intensity level and makes it more desirable. So I guess we all just start with, in terms of secrets of self-control, to ask yourself what's the why of what it is that you want. Yes?
Yes. And another piece would be when a person comes to me and they tell me their why, I'll ask them to rate it on a 0 to 10. So, how emotionally charged is this why for you? And if it's a 4, then I might say, what would it take to make it a 6? And then they might tell me, well, maybe. So, for example, perhaps someone says to me, well, I want to stop overeating. And they'll say that's at a 9 initially. And then I'll say, so let's say you're in a situation where you've told me that you typically overeat. So let's say we might put them in the evening on their couch. So I'll say, so now imagine yourself on the couch when you're watching TV and eating the chips. Let's say this is a typical experience. I'll say, so imagine yourself on the couch eating the chips. Now, as you're imagining that, I want you to tell me what number your emotionally important why gets then. And at that point, the person will often say, oh, at that time, it would probably get something more like a 2 or a 3 because I'm kind of in what the heck mode. So what this speaks to is that we actually have 2 different parts to ourselves. We actually have probably many more, but 2 parts of ourselves when it comes to this self-control issue. One part is the immediate gratification self, we could call it, or the impulsive self, the I want it now, what the heck self. And the other part would be the wise self, the part of ourselves that says, I will live with short-term discomfort in the name of long-term gain.
So you had 2 names for that first self, and it was immediate gratification or compulsive,
Impulsive.
and then the other was the why. Long-term versus short-term.
The other part of us would be the wise self. Wise.
Wise, W-I-S-E.
Correct.
Okay, I wrote down why. The why self, the contemplative self, the one observing self. Okay, the wise self. I got it. The deeper, wise person.
The wise self actually is that, JJ. It is the contemplative. It is the one who's observing. The impulsive self, imagine that your hand is right up against your face. So you can see your hand kind of, but you only kind of see it a little bit. Now, if you move it about 6 inches away from your face, you can really see it. You see you have 5 fingers. You can see lines on your fingers and hands. You can see your skin better. The wise self is the self that is actually watching what you're doing, what you're thinking, and what you're feeling. The impulsive self is simply reacting in the moment to whatever it feels or whatever the habit is that's driving it.
So now we have these 2 parts of ourselves, and I'm guessing when we're making these decisions to learn or create or cultivate more self-control, and we're, let's say, having goals and setting up things that we would like to have or do differently, let's say maybe promises to ourselves, what gets in our way of actually doing it and sticking to it?
One of the things that gets in the way is stress. We live in a culture where people get kind of addicted to being busy. In fact, you always hear people saying, I'm so busy, as if being busy is like a status symbol in our culture. And a lot of us are going through our days, pushing our limits, pushing too hard, and feeling a lot of stress. And then we turn to things to relieve our stress that in fact do not bring about what we need to really get a full relaxation experience. So we turn to things like television, shopping, video games, surfing the internet, alcohol, food, etc., instead of the things that might really relax us, like exercise or sports, meditation or yoga, reading, spending time with friends and family, engaging in a creative hobby, playing a game that's not electronic. So many of us are looking to get relief from our stress from things that, in fact, don't really give us that kind of relaxed, recharged experience. So, in essence, we go through the day very stressed out. And what the stress does is it makes us more impulsive because that stress response is coming from a part of the brain, the amygdala, that is meant to get us into the fight or flight response, to have us act immediately on a threat. So the impulsive self is meant to help us escape or fight against immediate threat. Well, when you're home in the evening after work, there's not generally an immediate threat. So our stress levels are so much higher in general because we have all these chores during the day and we've pushed ourselves so hard. And then at night, we have less self control because we're more tired. And self control requires energy. Plus, we're experiencing stress and we're trying to unwind using tools that don't really work well.
I have watched many people clients of mine, friends of mine, roommates of mine, past relationships, who put themselves to sleep with the television, who have got the radio on and the television on at the same time. And then they wonder why they get up in the morning and they're stressed out or they have anxiety. And it's amazing because I know there's research on that. But to hear you validate that, I mean, to me, it's one of those obvious things that we look to something else to, like you said, handle our stress, and they're not really doing that job. So really that stress isn't going away. It just gets numbed for a little while.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And another thing is that we may not be trying to solve the problems. Perhaps the stressor is a problem that we actually need to solve. And instead of solving it, we're just trying to sort of avoid it. And it might be that we might be too tired at night to solve the problem. And it might be that we need to carve out some time early in the day when our energy is better to write down what are the things that I'm worried about and brainstorm some ideas. What are some things I could do about this? And if you can't come up with anything, then figure out who's the person that knows more than you do about that problem and go ask them.
So I'm sure that most people can identify with some part of this conversation that we're having, like I said, whether they're an emotional eater or not, because some people, you and I had a conversation in our first show, which was Week in the Cycle of Emotional Eating, about identifying if someone was an emotional eater or not, and how I have in the past, out of boredom or maybe a little bit of nervousness or anxiety, have gone to the kitchen and looked for something to eat. And was that the definition of emotional eating? So in that sense, I would put self-control in there too, because it's not going to solve my problem. And I can benefit, which I'm sure a lot of people can, from increasing my awareness and practicing self-control and problem solving in a way that's actually effective versus avoiding. So for everyone who's listening, whether they're an emotional eater or not, or just wish that they would eat less than they currently do, because maybe they do want to lose some weight or get healthier or change their lifestyle in some way, or maybe it has nothing to do with food or weight loss, maybe it has to do with something else. I know you have a ton of tips and tools and you teach classes and you have information for people. What we've covered so far is to identify the emotional why and figuring out what a real emotional why is, right, in terms of the scale of intensity of importance. So that way something more important is more likely going to help encourage better behavior or awareness. And then just being able to identify the immediate gratification versus that wise self. So I know that Lisa's going to share with us some tips or tools for the listeners on how you can develop more self-control. But first, we need to take a break and thank our sponsors. Is your website working for you? If it's not, and you're frustrated with your brand, website, or current online results, Every Angle Media can help transform your existing business presence and build you a website that works when you're not working. Every Angle Media is a full-service web development firm that specializes in solving problems with open-source solutions. We offer complete design services, custom content management systems, fully integrated e-commerce solutions, cross-platform mobile development, and custom third-party integration. And we're here to help. Visit our site to see our work at everyanglemedia.com or give us a call at 310-798-7228. Again, that's everyanglemedia.com. Do you want to look and feel years younger? Learn more about your hormone health and how to get properly tested. Sign up for the Healthy Hormone Kit at nourishingwellness.com. It features the essential tests you need to tell your doctor to order for you to learn more about your current levels. Plus, you'll receive lots of healthy eating and lifestyle tips to improve your hormone health naturally. Again, that's www.nourishingwellness.com. Okay, Lisa, so what are some of these tips and tools that you can give listeners for how they can develop more self-control?
Oh, certainly. Some other things I didn't say regarding stress is that we are sleep deprived. As a nation, we are very sleep deprived. We don't recognize the role of sleep with regards to self-control. If you are tired, that is not the time to put yourself into a self-control conundrum. And of course, when do people tend to overeat or overdrink, etc.? It's mostly in the evenings or late afternoons when they're tired. So sleeping, the recommendation is generally 7 to 9 hours a night. Another thing, keeping your blood sugar stable, which is eating regularly throughout the day. Again, very important to keep your energy up. Your physical, mental, and emotional energy are all required for you to have better self-control, which is why we might need to, at certain times of day when we know our energy is low, keep ourselves in low temptation environments. Another thing is you might develop a role model. For example, think of someone whom you perceive to be just a model of self-control, a model of someone who follows through on their word. And it could be a professional athlete or someone you don't even know in person, in real life. And ask yourself, what would that person do? Or it could be a spiritual figure. If you tend to judge yourself, judging ourselves is very common. We think it will keep us in line. We think it will help us with self-control, but in fact, research indicates the opposite. When we are harsh with ourselves and critical with ourselves, we are much more likely to give in and give up our long-term goals. So developing a role model and bringing that person to mind and asking ourselves, what would that person do? It could be a loved one. If I'm judging myself, for example, sometimes a person will be overeating. And they'll notice, I'm judging myself right now. I'm telling myself, I can't believe I'm doing this. And as we become more mindful of what we're doing, we can start saying, even in the middle of a bite, what would my good friend say to me now? Would that friend be calling me a loser? Or would that friend say, you're doing the best you can? Another piece is when we become more mindful of the experience. In other words, if you're overeating, taste the food. Does it taste as good as your mind told you it would? Many people, when they start becoming mindful of what it tastes like when they're overeating, notice that in fact, this does not taste nearly as good and end up eating less that way. We also can enlist the help of others. It's very important to know that most of us don't change significant behaviors without support from other people. So enlisting an accountability partner, people in AA get sponsors, enlisting the help of a trainer if you need to exercise, enlisting someone or even a group. Become part of a group that's doing the same thing that you want to achieve. I know many people who are working on business building, who join business building groups. It's important to look at the people around you. Are those people helping you say yes to your long-term goals? Or are they making it easier for you to say, well, they're not doing what I say I'm going to do, so maybe it's okay if I don't do it. Another thing, to be able to get connected to that wise self, when you feel an urge to do something, you might pull out your emotionally important why, and then give yourself somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes. And during that 10 and 15 minutes, you might just keep looking at your why. You might walk away from whatever it is that's tempting you or bothering you, or the circumstance or situation that you find troublesome. You might even imagine that future self in that 10 or 15 minutes. What would it be like for me to act on this urge right now? How will I feel if in 15 minutes I don't act on this urge? What could I do instead? So in that 10 or 15 minutes, you have some time to contemplate. And it's important to contemplate from a kind place, not a judging place. How would this play out? What's the best I can do? And remember that the best you can do is not the same every day. It's not the same at every circumstance. It's just the best you can do right now. So these are some of the things that I think are helpful. I also think that if a person needs to write down a list of these stress relievers and put into place on a regular basis routines for stress relief, many people I know, they say, well, I'm going to start meditating. But they don't actually say when. And they don't create a routine. They don't put it into at 8 a.m. when I wake up, or before breakfast, or before I go to sleep. So sometimes creating routines for relaxation gets people to relax.
Absolutely. I'm all about creating routines, using a little bit of that left brain strategy to handle that right brain emotion and our flowiness, which is important, but definitely having accountability and some kind of strategy is important for empowering us to know that we can achieve whatever it is that we're setting out to do. So Lisa, this has been great. There's so many tools and tips in here for people that I'm sure something resonated with everybody. I know it did for me too. So I appreciate that you've been here again. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, JJ. I love talking about this material. I think most people don't believe in themselves because they try to do something too hard that they don't really have an emotionally important why about. Choose something small. Start by just watching what you're doing with it. Look at your emotionally important why. See what's getting in the way. That's the first step.
And for those of you that are listening, Dr. Lisa also works with people over Skype as well as over the phone. If you live in Arizona, then you are lucky to have access to her, especially if you're in Scottsdale or Phoenix. But Lisa, tell us your website address and phone number.
poweroverfood.com is the website address, and the phone number is 480-315-9311.
Make sure to check out poweroverfood.com and give Lisa a call or drop her an email if you think that you may need some help and that she's the person who can help you get to where you want to be. Thank you again, Lisa, for being here.
Thank you, JJ.
Get the hottest tips and latest trends for your business success with today's Innovative Woman magazine, a free print and online digital magazine. Claim your free subscription and get it mailed to your home or office today at today'sinnovativewoman.com.
Looking for an engaging and inspiring speaker? Does your group need a good jolt of positive thinking? Look no further than JJ Flizanes. Visit her site to check out her most requested topics and video examples. jjflizanes.com. That's jjflizanes.com.
The Fit to Love podcast show offers you 6 days a week of helpful content to achieve the happy life you deserve. Movement Mondays and Tasty Tuesdays are weekly videocasts, while Wellness Wednesdays, Thoughtful Thursdays, Freedom Fridays, and Sexy Saturdays are audio-only shows themed every week to address your holistic life and needs. If the show inspired you, we would love for you to share it and subscribe. Thank you so much for joining us today. Head on over to fittolove.tv for recaps of every show, resources, and to join the community. That's FIT, the number 2, LOVE.TV. Have a fit and fabulous day.